Supply chain management deserves some special attention due to the unique risks it presents in today's landscape. Research by McKinsey has determined that supply chains account for an estimated 80 to 90% of a company's negative impacts. These impacts include Scope 3 emissions, which refer to the entirety of greenhouse gases emitted as supplies make their way to the company. A supplier's own ESG maturity is becoming increasingly important in how companies choose procurement partners due to the wide range of risks associated with the global supply system. For example, negative supply chain events that once occurred on the other side of the world are now front and center due to social media and greater stakeholder awareness of these issues. Due to these changes, companies are now considered accountable for the negative environmental and social impacts along supply chains, including third-party subcontractors. As an analyst, understanding the company's approach to supply chain management can give you a good indication to how they manage risks across the enterprise. Be sure to check if a company has a supplier code of conduct, comprehensive oversight protocols, a long-term strategy, all to reduce the risks associated with their specific procurement needs. Chapter 4, Key Considerations for Companies and Investors. Now that we have an idea of modern stakeholder expectations and how they impact a company's approach to ESG and risk management, let's look at some key considerations that you should be aware of from both the company and the investor perspective. The completeness and transparency of ESG reporting can have a direct impact on valuations, shareholder voting, RFP decision-making, and other decisions key to securing capital and ongoing support. All stakeholders, including investors and creditors, rely on publicly available information to determine the effectiveness and maturity of a company's ESG strategy. As you can imagine, a company with limited publicly available information runs the risk of its most important stakeholders making assumptions about what they are and are not doing, and what risks they are and are not aware of and planning for. To figure this all out, an analyst should look for a company's ESG disclosures and associated reports, ESG info on the webpage, and ultimately look for reporting on material issues relevant to the industry, whether it be on a third-party reporting initiative platform like the Carbon Disclosure Project or integrated into their annual 10K report. An investor should also look at ratings and ranking agencies and key indices such as MSCI, Just Capital, and the Dow Jones Sustainability Index to glean insights on ESG performance. It's important to note, ratings and ranking agencies also rely on publicly available information to assign a rating or inclusion in ESG lists and indices. The way a company discloses and communicates their ESG management, strategy, progress, and outcomes directly impacts how external stakeholders perceive their ESG maturity, their corporate culture, and their ability to create long-term value. As an analyst, you can provide significant value through your ability to identify thematic consistencies in how a company shows up in ratings, indices, and ESG reports. It's important to note that every entity, every research firm and rating list uses a different set of criteria and verification processes to inform their determination of a company's ESG performance. This is another reason why, as a financial analyst, you need to understand the details and nuances of the company, their approach to ESG, and how they're disclosing their efforts. You'll also need to be familiar with these rating agencies and indices, as they're important tools you can use to help you do your job. As you can see here, there is significant variance in the way 4 different entities gauge a single company's ESG maturity and performance. Therefore, these ratings should not be taken as a sole source of input in evaluating ESG performance. Corporations do not exist in a vacuum, and a global economy and global supply chain means ESG impacts can negatively or positively influence all parties along a value chain or in a business ecosystem due to their interconnectedness and their interdependence. We touched upon some of these issues at the beginning of the course, but now we'll take a deeper dive. To remind everyone, ESG ultimately provides a competitive advantage in the following 5 ways. 1, reducing risk. 2, increasing opportunities and growth. 3, enhancing organizational resiliency. 4, boosting workforce productivity. And finally, cementing corporate reputation and stakeholder trust. Let's look at some specific examples of what this could look like. Here's an example for each of the sources of competitive advantage that demonstrate the difference between a strong ESG strategy and a weak one. Reduced risk. 2 local food production companies rely on consistent shipments of crops, seeds, and materials to operate. Recent storms have flooded the distribution routes that a large wholesaler uses to reach these 2 companies. The company with a weaker ESG strategy cannot access the material inputs required to produce their products, creating an immediate disruption to basic operations. The company with a stronger ESG strategy has actively cultivated relationships with local small-scale farmers to hedge against climate change impacts and is able to access their key material inputs from local producers and in turn able to continue operating without any disruptions. Opportunities and growth. Take the same 2 food production companies. One company decides that the additional costs and complexity of going through kosher and halal certification for their products is not worth the resources or effort. The other company thinks it's an opportunity. The company with a stronger ESG strategy has identified that they compete with their local peer in markets with large Jewish and Muslim populations. Now, this company has captured these customer bases and the institutional customers that serve these populations. The company with the weaker ESG strategy saved some resources up front, but ultimately lost potential customers and the opportunities associated with these customers in the long run. Organizational resiliency. 2 competing North American hotel corporations were operating in a coastal tourist destination in Southeast Asia. Local community members had been holding recent rallies calling for greater government oversight on plastic waste from companies operating in the region. The company with the stronger ESG strategy believed they could be a target for this stakeholder opposition and began procuring recyclable and biodegradable alternatives from domestic suppliers, promoting more on-site dining, and opening up a dialogue with the community. Although more expensive at the outset, this company anticipated the necessary change and adapted. The company with the weaker ESG strategy became the next target of community protests and ultimately suffered losses from these disruptions to daily operations. Workforce productivity. 2 competing companies with different corporate cultures. One company has a competitive culture that emphasizes winning at all costs. The other company has a culture that emphasizes collaboration, inclusive dialogue, and candor. The company with the competitive culture has higher attrition rates, higher associated healthcare costs due to burnout from this competitive approach, while the other has lower attrition rates and a healthier workforce with lowered associated healthcare costs. Which do you think is the company with the strong ESG strategy? You guessed it, the one that focuses on the cultural impacts of workforce productivity. Finally, reputation and stakeholder trust. 2 companies are suffering severe human resource constraints. One company with a weaker ESG strategy has minimal relations with the local community and other stakeholder groups and continues to post and pray openings on online job boards to fill vacancies. They're currently operating at 60% capacity. The company with the stronger ESG strategy has been tuned into affairs of the local community and some of the local community challenges, one being workforce development. This company engages the local municipality and 3 community colleges, eventually receiving a grant to develop a job training certification program in conjunction with the 3 community colleges. Now a local and sustainable talent pipeline has been developed that both alleviates the long-standing human resource constraints of the strong ESG company while maximizing local resources and solving a local stakeholder issue.